A lot of the time, I think people say that trans women have it worse rhetorically than trans men. And I will say that trans women enjoy, quote unquote, a certain visibility that might be considered one of the main differences, that they they're more visible and the media talks about them more. There's all this insinuation about them being predators or whatever. I will say though that trans men are not completely invisible within the context of the transphobia. In fact, there are some prominent ways in which trans men are targeted that I feel are often ignored. Like when J.K. Rowling made her big manifesto about trans people, she did talk about trans women in that, but she also talked about trans men a lot and how, oh, they're turning these girls into men. They're cutting off their healthy breasts and stuff like our long lost girls, our long lost lesbians. Trans men enjoy a type of infantilization, along with, I guess, in the broader culture, a sort of invisibility. But trans men and AFAB non-binary people have an extremely high rate of lifetime sexual assault compared to cis women and trans women. And yeah, there's this whole, there's like a lot of attention actually on these poor girls. We need to protect them, directed at young trans men and young assigned female non-binary people. And in particular, if you all remember, there was this whole book called Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters by Abigail Schreier, right? Where she talks about basically trans men and trans men like influencers. And yeah, it's like, it's deeply transphobic and it is specific to trans men and it's gross. So on that subject, y'all remember the Cass review, the Cass report? We talked about it several times here on the channel, I believe. So Dr. Hilary Cass, who was the primary author of the Cass review, and the Cass review is this thing that has been used now to justify denying care to any trans youth in the UK. First, they were like, you can't get this care on the NHS. And then they were like, also, by the way, if you decide to go to the private clinic and get it privately, we're going to investigate your family and potentially take your kids away from you. And people have been citing it even in conversations that I've had. I on the Transatlantic Call-In Show, where we accept calls and talk to people about the issues. I have recently had someone on there cite the Cass review to me when trying to justify the idea that giving trans kids puberty pausing medication is extreme and they shouldn't be doing that. And we've debunked the Cass review already. We've talked about how it doesn't have any credibility. It did all this like selective choosing of research so that it could select research that supported the view that trans youth shouldn't get this care. Just completely discredited any research that would counteract that view. Not a very scientific endeavor. And the reason we're talking about this all today is that not only have there been factual errors and a negative impact from the Cass review, but some claims have been made by Dr. Max Davey and Dr. Lorna Hobbs that apparently Dr. Hilary Cass, who is described in the review as a senior clinician with no prior involvement or fixed views in this area, she recommended that gender clinicians read this book, Irreversible Damage. Apparently, Dr. Cass expressed her dismay and shock at the practice of medical transition to one of us before she started this review. Okay, and remember, allegedly, she was supposed to have had no fixed views in the area, but before this even started, she said, oh, I'm shocked at the practice of medical transition. And she also recommended strongly to the other clinicians involved that they read Irreversible Damage. Cass is described on the Cass Review website as an expert who came in with no fixed views. We will leave the reader to draw their own conclusions. And yeah, like Abigail Schreier wrote this book. She stated that allowing trans people to change their birth certificates would lead to rape. She opposes trans people using bathrooms corresponding to their gender. And she calls trans acceptance, quote, misogyny in progressive clothing. The book has been so extreme that it has been pulled by some publishers. One portion of the book even compares youth gender transition to the experiences of Jewish children in the Holocaust. The erasure was so complete she couldn't recover what she had lost, even when she might have wanted to. So yeah, obviously this is striking because this was supposed to be, I mean, it's not shocking at all. It is striking, I will say, because yeah, they've presented this as, oh, this is a team of people who don't have any fixed views, but the woman whose name is on it strongly recommended that her fellow clinicians read this very obviously transphobic book, and that she expressed that she was like shocked and upset that we allow youth access to this medication. So, okay, you want to keep claiming that she has no fixed views on the subject? You want to keep claiming this? Okay. There is one spot of good news on this subject, because the British Medical Association has called the Cass review unsubstantiated and passes a resolution against its implementation. The British Medical Association is the professional organization which represents doctors in the UK, and it has called for a public critique of the review and to bar its implementation. And given the news that we just heard, it's obvious that the people involved in establishing this report had anti-trans views. It's obvious, but it's different now for there to have been a whistleblower who says, yeah, actually, Dr. Cass had a fixed view. She was not impartial. She was supposed to be impartial. She was not impartial before this whole thing started. So it is great to see the largest doctors' union in the UK voted in favor of a resolution to publicly critique the Cass review, which has been used to crack down on gender-affirming care for trans youth. It called the recommendations of the Cass review unsubstantiated. The British Medical Association also voted to oppose the implementation of the review's recommendations, which comes after a court ruled that the government can ban the use of puberty blockers on an emergency basis, and cited this review. So, yeah, and the situation, again, is that trans youth in the UK cannot access puberty-pausing medications, which give them the benefit of a couple years additional time to be screened by the multidisciplinary team in the gender clinics, and allow them like to not have irreversible changes done to them by their natal puberty that could cause them distress and would cost tens of thousands of dollars of NHS money to try to fix later on via surgeries. Hi, I'm Alexander, and this is Mitternacht. You should hit the like button and subscribe and check out the Patreon. And ooh, look at this hoodie I'm wearing. It's merch. Check it out. Links in the description. Thank you. And again, you can't get the medication privately, or they will investigate your family and take your kids away. Excuse me. The British Medical Association is an independent union representing 151,000 doctors in the UK. They negotiate on behalf of all doctors in the UK, and they lobby for best practices in medicine to the UK Parliament. The organization states that it, quote, regularly represents the views of doctors and their patients in Parliament, and is also responsible for briefing other medical workers and members of Parliament. The resolution is substantial. It states that gender identity services in the UK are, quote, inadequate, a claim well supported by extreme wait times of 5 years or more, which have been linked to suicides among some trans patients. The review asserts, this report asserts that the Cass review itself engaged in, quote, unexplained study deviations and, quote, ambiguous eligibility criteria, while excluding evidence supporting transgender care. So that's huge. You know, again, we knew a lot of these things, but it is huge for the largest union representing medical professionals to come out and say, no, you should not be going off of this evidence. Although, you know, I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference. I don't know what good it's going to do, because I think that the UK government has a motivated, vested interest in transphobia. And I'm deeply concerned about banning puberty blockers. They have additional uses. Oh, to be clear, you can still get puberty blockers for precocious puberty or for cancer. Like that, you know, individuals might have reproductive cancer when they're younger. It is exclusively trans people, trans minors, trans youth who cannot get this medication. That is the only diagnosis that they justify treating this way. And, you know, again, I've gone off about it before. It's insane to me as an American who has the 14th Amendment You should not be able to say, yes, cis kids can get puberty blockers for precocious puberty, but trans kids can't get puberty blockers for their diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Like, that's crazy. But the UK doesn't have the same rules that we do. So they can do that, I guess, where they just pull an emergency court order. It's basically an emergency court order that says, yeah, no, you're allowed to discriminate against trans kids specifically. Yeah, I'm always telling my fellow doctors to read a medical book written by just some lady. And I'm some lady telling you about how trans care is bad. And citing trans YouTubers as my justification for that. Jesus, I haven't read Irreversible Damage. I decided not to do that when it first came out, but sometimes I wonder, like, maybe I should, you know? It would be so late now, though. It's been years. It would not be timely content if I were to review Irreversible Damage at this point. Bella in the YouTube chat says, the review that they're looking to build to address adult services looks like it's going to be even more draconian. They're going to decide if we can change our NHS number, which is gender locked by birth. Yeah, you have to get a brand new NHS number when you officially change your gender and get like a new... It's when you get a gender recognition certificate, right? That you get a new NHS number, and they're going to consider taking that away from you too. Wow. Insane. You could read it and do a book review even though it's old. Yeah. Would it be worth it though? Maybe I could do like I could give it a title that's like a retrospective on Irreversible Damage. We could read it and laugh. I don't know. It could be fun. I'll put it on my list of things that I might do. Let's see. Irreversible Damage. Let me know in the comments if you want to see me do that. Currently, we can change the NHS number by request. Oh, and they're just considering taking that away from you. It's just really nice to have confirmation that Dr. Cass, for as much as she claims to have been impartial, for as much as she claims to have not had a fixed view, we've known already that she affiliated with explicitly anti-trans people. But now we know, in private, she is explicitly anti-trans. I would like to hear what the book says, but mostly I just want to give Lux homework. Oh, well, thanks. I've just started reading this week. I've just been like, oh, I'm going to take my book to bed and it's like read for a little while before I actually fall asleep. Wouldn't that be great? Let me bring Irreversible Damage to bed with me. Yeah, exactly, Nuvenal. I have no prior opinion on the Jewish question, you guys. I just tell all my friends to read the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's just interesting. God. Thank you so much to all my patrons, but especially Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rovag, Jack, Amanda B., Michelle Frateroli, Michelle Winter, Wellington Marcus, Danielle McDonald, DZXN, Ella Nobody, Pastel Infinity, Suzanne Maynard, Nova, Desi Quiche, Celeste, Athiette, Jamie Jam, Sojo, Bean, Kevin Young, Mr. Atheist, Liam Hodgson, Elizabeth Bartell, and Jericho.